Hi, my name's Ernie Graham, and I'm going to tell you briefly a bit about my life and how I got to do now what I'm doing, which is going around speaking to young people all over the state of Maryland and at times around the country. I grew up in East Baltimore. I went to St. Anne's Elementary School, and I was a pretty good student. I was an altar boy at St. Anne's Church. I knew all the right things to do. I knew staying away from drugs and alcohol and cigarettes was the right thing to do at a very early age. Unfortunately, I went to high school at Lake Clifton, and I skipped 5th grade, so I was a year younger than everybody, and somehow peer pressure, trying to fit in with the older guys on my team at the time, got me on a path that took 22 years. So I'm going to tell you briefly about the 22-year period in my life. I went to Lake Clifton, played on varsity basketball in 9th grade, started experimenting with marijuana and cigarettes, went from an A student to a C and a D student. Ultimately got arrested in the 9th grade and failed because I missed 3 months of school. You would think at that point I would get the message. Unfortunately, it got even worse. My basketball career took off. It went in a positive direction, which kind of confirmed to me that maybe my parents, the teachers, the preachers, maybe they were wrong. Maybe drugs and cigarettes and alcohol was not that bad, because I was able to use drugs, play basketball, win a lot of games. In fact, never lost a high school game in 3 years, won 3 consecutive championships. I was then recruited by 300 colleges across the United States and chose the University of Maryland. I wanted to be a pro basketball player. I didn't want to be a pro because of the money. I want you guys to understand it was not a lot of money back then as it is now. But I loved to play basketball, and it's just the greatest sport in the world to me. And so I went to the University of Maryland, and I had success there early. My sophomore year, my first start as shooting guard, set a school record, 44 points, played 25 minutes, and became sort of a small rock star in the area. And so at that point, I began to believe that drugs were not bad for you. I began to believe that maybe I was an exception. Maybe I could do whatever I wanted to do off the court and still have success on the court. As difficulties came about, my drug use increased. By the time I left the University of Maryland, I had become probably a everyday marijuana, everyday cigarette smoker. Hard drugs were just starting to be introduced, cocaine. Got drafted in the 3rd round to the 76ers. Became the 3rd leading scorer on the team during the preseason. Had a pretty good preseason, but I carried my drug use to Philadelphia. I was drafted by the 76ers. I was the backup player for Dr. J. And somehow I felt like I could stop using drugs whenever I want. And I want people to know that I was told this when I was very young, that you can stop using drugs whenever you need to, whenever you want to. It's only marijuana. It's only cigarettes. Once you start using drugs and you're very young and you don't develop coping skills, you only increase drug use as life goes on, because there'll be difficulties and there'll be things to challenge you in life. And if you don't develop coping skills and you depend, like I did, on drugs and alcohol to get you through, it only gets worse. When it was my opportunity to stop, which was at a point when the Sixers knew that I was using drugs and gave me an opportunity to have a clean drug test, and I failed the test. I was cut from the 76ers. My life changed immediately. I went from a megastar at the University of Maryland with free room and board, free everything, basically, to being homeless in 24 hours. When I was cut from the Sixers, my hotel bill stopped that day. My meal money stopped that day. And my life changed dramatically. I didn't understand the seriousness of what had taken place. I think I was a bit numb, you know. So for 2 weeks I kind of hid, and I stayed at one of the players' houses in Philadelphia and began to use cocaine and drink a lot, trying to stop the pain that I was feeling. After a couple of weeks, I came out of that situation and went overseas and started to play basketball in Europe and South America. I continued to play basketball overseas for 13 and a half years. My drug use continued and escalated. At some point, I became a heroin addict. I started to smoke cocaine. In the end, became a crack user and a heroin user, and just a really depressed person. I had a 14-year-old son at the end of all this who grew up without me. I had a baby, his name is Jonathan. I prayed for, because at the time I knew I couldn't stop using, and I knew that I needed help. And I prayed for a child that would help me to be strong. My wife is a terrific woman. She married me and hoped that things would get better. They got worse. After getting injured over in Europe, I had to take off a year from basketball, and that's when things got really bad. Because before I could come home from overseas, use drugs, go back and play ball, and basketball was kind of saving my life. But once I stopped playing basketball, I had no way of getting away from the drugs. So for about 18 months, I became extremely addicted. Heroin every day. I got arrested 5 times for various crimes, stealing, robbing people, just some of the stupidest things you can do, and still couldn't stop. Jonathan was born in 1991. For 2.5 years, I traveled through Baltimore City at times with him in the car with me, taking him places I was so ashamed of. No one should take their child. I love Jonathan Graham so much. I looked at my baby and my heart was broken because I couldn't stop. It took an intervention by God to get me off of drugs. And Jonathan had issues with speaking. When he was 2, we found out he wasn't speaking as normal children do, and I began to believe that my drug use affected my child. And I think that's the point when I started to understand that I had to get help and I had to get off of those drugs, because I had to take care of my son, because that's probably the only person that I felt loved me really at that point in my life, which was the lowest point. And so I went away to treatment for 20 days in 1995. Jonathan was now 3, and my wife wanted a divorce, which she so deserved. I stayed there for 20 days. By now I had been on this journey of drug use and cigarette smoking and just ridiculous spending. I probably blew $1 million overseas playing basketball using drugs. So I had no money, no education, and I was at a place where I didn't want to live anymore. So in August of 1995, I sought help. I went to a treatment facility, and there, first I was sick. I was sick, and I couldn't do for myself. I was so sick, I thought I was going to die, and I really did. And a part of me wanted to die. And after going through maybe 6-7 days of that, and I found out God wasn't going to let me die, I asked him to help me to live, help me find a way and find a reason to continue living. At that point, I began to develop a close relationship with Jesus Christ. I began to pray a whole bunch every day. I began to get stronger. And when I came home, to my amazement, and I can't tell you which day it was, I didn't smoke anymore. I don't even remember which day. I just know I woke up, my pack of cigarettes was on the bed in the room at the rehab. I didn't want a cigarette. I haven't had a cigarette in 18 years now. I know that God was preparing me for what I do today. I did not tell anybody because I thought I lost my mind. I've heard about him, but I never knew or believed he would come and see me personally. Moving forward, I came home from the rehab. My wife noticed something different about me. My son was not having me leave home. He said he was going with his dad. My wife and I made a decision that I would stay in the guest room so that we could raise Jonathan. And 4 days after I was home from the rehab, the police came to my house. They arrested me and took me to Upper Marlboro, Maryland, on a charge that I had not gone to court about before I had gone to treatment. And there was a judge there who was a Maryland fan, a Maryland guy. He knew who I was. He, in fact, knew where I was. And for the first time in my life, I told the truth about who I was and what I was. The strangest thing happened at that facility because the treatment place gave me antidepressants because I felt like I wasn't going to be able to make it without some kind of help. I was arrested. I stayed in a cell for maybe 36 hours, and I wasn't able to have medication. That was the first time I felt free in all of my life, was inside of a cell. I had no need for cigarettes. I had no need for drugs. I had a peace that I had never experienced in my life. I went in the courtroom and the judge said, "I'm gonna let you go home today." When I got out of the facility in Upper Marlboro, I went to the front of the place. I sat out on the curb. It was a beautiful sunny day in September. And I looked up and I thanked God for the peace that I had felt and for him setting me free after all of those years of being in bondage. And I asked God, what can I do to thank you? And at that point, it became clear to me that I needed to do something and give back to help somebody's child not go through or go down that path that I had gone. Maybe I'd have some type of effect going the right way if I just do the right things. And it became clear to me that when God took away the cigarette addiction, that was a preparation for me to do the program of Get the Message, which started in 1996. And I would go around to various public schools in Baltimore County, go to schools in Baltimore City, churches, recreation centers, and talk to young people about my life, to encourage them to make healthy choices, to do what is right, which most people intuitively know. And if you don't know, after meeting me, you will know about what happens when you make the wrong choices, choose the wrong friends, have low self-esteem and self-worth, and give in to peer pressure. So I developed a program called Get the Message, which has life skill training, after school basketball programs, which grew very, very fast. So for 12 years, I worked in Baltimore County running the after school program. I met the Ripken folks shortly after that, and we began to partner. Cal's a great guy. Though I'm not a baseball player, athletics is the way to get the kids' attention. So he and I made a good decision, I believe, to partner up and do life skill training, have myself speak to young people. Cal has done all the right things. That's a great role model. And I've done a lot of the wrong things, which is another type of role model. And at the same time, give them the life skill training that they deserve and they need. Because I know for a fact, if I was afforded, hopefully, the types of talks and programs that are provided now for our youth, I may have made better decisions and choices when I was a young person. You know, I'm very passionate about what I do. I really love people and I love children. I'll say one thing for certain, I plan to do this as long as I'm able to. I love what I do.